and we're in the run-up to Christmas now. So I thought it would be interesting to just think about some aspects of the Christmas story that we might not be totally familiar with. We might know the words, but we might not have thought of the aspect that I'm going to mention. So did you realize that part of the well-known Christmas story emphasizes the need for us not to tell lies? I wonder if you've ever thought about that. And so we're going to look at some verses that are very, very commonly used at this time of the year as we think about the amazing facts of the Christmas story. And we're going to find out that behind it is a good caution to us from God, that we might not lie or add a little bit around the truth. So I want to do some readings with you, and then perhaps all of this will become a little bit more evident. And the first one is in James chapter 5. Now you'll say, this isn't a Christmas verse, but don't worry, we'll get there. James chapter 5 and verse 12. I'm reading from the English Standard Version. James writes, "But above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth, or by any other oath. Let your yes be yes, your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation." And now, if you don't mind going with me back to the Gospel by Mark just for a moment. And again, you might be saying to me, well, I don't understand why you're using this in a Christmas talk, but let's just see. Mark chapter 16, that's the last chapter in the Gospel by Mark, chapter 16, and right towards the end of the chapter, so it's really concluding this whole book, isn't it? Often most important things are left to the end. And here we read in verse 19 of Mark chapter 16, "So then the Lord Jesus, after he had spoken to them, was taken up into heaven and sat down at the right hand of God. And they went out and preached everywhere, while the Lord worked with them and confirmed the message by accompanying signs." And confirmed the message by accompanying signs. And you might see the link between this verse and what we're going to read next, because now we're going to go back into familiar territory for Christmas Bible readings. We're going to look in the book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah. Near the start of the book, at chapter 7, Isaiah chapter 7, and let's read most of the early part of the chapter, down to verse 14 anyway. Isaiah chapter 7 verse 1. "In the days of Ahaz the son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, Rezin the king of Syria and Pekah the son of Remaliah the king of Israel came up to Jerusalem to wage war against it, but could not yet mount an attack against it. When the house of David was told, 'Syria is in league with Ephraim,' the heart of Ahaz and the heart of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. And the Lord said to Isaiah, 'Go out to meet Ahaz, you and Shear-Jashub your son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the washer's field, and say to him, be careful, be quiet, do not fear, do not let your heart be faint because of these two smouldering stumps of firebrands, at the fierce anger of Rezin and Syria and the son of Remaliah. Because Syria, with Ephraim and the son of Remaliah, has devised evil against you, saying, let us go up against Judah and terrify it, and let us conquer it for ourselves, and set up the son of Tabiel as king in the midst of it. Thus says the Lord God, it shall not stand, and it shall not come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. And within 65 years, Ephraim will be shattered from being a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria. And head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. If you are not firm in faith, you will not be firm at all. Again the Lord spoke to Ahaz, and here's the bit. Ask a sign of the Lord your God. Let it be as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test. And he said, that's Isaiah said to Ahaz. Isaiah said, Hear then, O house of David. Is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Now, will you like to just go with me on to chapter 9? Chapter 9, and we're just going to read a couple of verses in chapter 9, just verses 6 and 7. So this is continuing in the prophecy of Isaiah. And he's just spoken about Emmanuel, God with us, being the child that's to be born of a virgin. And now he says in Isaiah 9 and verse 6, For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there'll be no end, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. We'll come back to those passages in James and Mark in a minute or two about not swearing by heaven or by earth, and being very careful how we say the truth. I was just thinking, generally speaking, there's a tendency these days, isn't there, to what we call political correctness. You know, above all, don't offend anybody. Say whatever you want to say, but say it in such a way that you don't go outside of the boundary lines of what's acceptable to others. And so we've got this term, political correctness. Part of the impact of that is that we don't like to speak about religion to people now. Or some people don't like to speak about their religion because it might offend somebody else of a different religion. So we'll just not talk about it at all. Politically correct not to talk about religion too much. And certainly not to say anything that's too unambiguous, too direct. And so people tend to be wishy-washy about these things. And what's true in our everyday world is also true in the matters of diplomacy. So if you want to listen to some boring news items, then listen to what they say when the politicians in the different countries start talking. And they start saying what they wouldn't do. Of course we wouldn't do this, of course we wouldn't do that. Just like Russia said it wasn't going to invade Ukraine. It had put all its troops along the border. And the US from its satellites could watch and see how the troops were amassing and be sending messages to the Ukraine government saying, they're going to attack, they're going to attack. And the Russians say, oh, of course we would never do a thing like that. It wouldn't have been politically correct for their diplomats to be saying, oh, well, we're going to attack on such and such a day in February 2022. So in diplomacy, you see it, working around the truth and sometimes coming at it in a way that makes it a lie. So I wanted to emphasize that from the Christmas story that we're going to remember again today, it's a matter of God's truth. It's not a matter of conjecture, maybe right, maybe wrong. It's absolutely true, the Christmas account that we're going to consider again today. And we're right to be, the word is unequivocal. It means that we're not just going to say what's politically correct. We're going to say the truth for what it is. I wonder if that's what James was heading at. You know, James, if you want to look at it, you can go back into Matthew's Gospel in chapter 5, round about verse 33, somewhere around there. And you'll see that James was more or less quoting what Jesus himself had said. Don't swear by heaven, don't swear by earth or anything. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Does that mean that you're never to speak to anybody except in yes or no? I know some people like that. Katie, you're all right. We do talk. But Katie says less than me, and that's probably because she's a more wise person than I am. But God is not intending us to be silent completely. What he's saying is, don't add to your words these words of political correctness. Let your yes mean yes. Let your no mean no. Don't get wishy-washy on the boundary lines. There's nothing wrong with saying more if you're going to stick to the truth and say it correctly and easily to be understood. One of the Proverbs, you can look it up if you like, and I'll give you a reward if you come back next week and tell me which one it is, where the proverb writer says, even a fool, when he remains silent, is considered wise. So there's sometimes when, if you don't know the answer to something, you're better not to try and speak too much about it, because you might be adding words beyond the yes or beyond the no, and it's going to bring you into the judgment of first the people that you're speaking to, but also the God of heaven, who hears every word we say and weighs it up. So I think that's probably what James was saying when he was saying, just let your yes be yes and your no be no. Now we must bring that truth back into the account that we've read in the book of Isaiah, about Isaiah, God's prophet, speaking to the king of the land of Judah in which Isaiah lived, God's special territory, on all the surface of the world that God could have picked. He picks this little lot of land in the Middle East, and out of the whole of it that used to be governed and looked after by 12 tribes, the sons of Jacob, who was renamed Israel, so it was all called Israel. Now there were only 2 remaining that were faithful to God, Judah and Benjamin, in the south of that whole territory, even though that was a little territory to start with. Now there's only Judah and Benjamin left of the tribal territories, and Judah was the most important because that's where Jerusalem was, and God had said, that's where I want to be worshipped, and this is the way you're to worship me. In this temple that was built by Solomon, he had strict rules about anybody coming to him. You didn't just walk in and say, oh, it's a nice day, I feel like being a tourist, I think I'll go into the temple and have a look what it's like inside. No. This is the one place on the face of the earth where God allowed his kingship to be fully expressed, and his subjects were to come before him, and there had to be a priesthood that did things in the right way in their approach to God. Ahaz was the king in Isaiah's day. You'd think, being king over the territory that God had specially chosen, that you'd almost be sure that the king would be a really godly man. Far from it. If you look at the historical accounts of the kings of Judah, Ahaz must be one of the worst. Those of you who are younger, think about what it would have been like to have been one of Ahaz's children, because some of them died as he put them through the fire in idolatrous practice. He sacrificed his own children to idols. And this man was king in Jerusalem. Isaiah is going to come to him, and he's going to say to him, you're planning and scheming, and you're worried about this confederacy, about the northern tribes that are no longer obeying God, going in league with Syria, even further to the north, and they're going to gang up on you, and they've already tried it once, and they've taken one of your chief cities, and now they're coming to attack Jerusalem, and you're all getting fraidy cat about it. And Isaiah is saying, if you've got faith, let it be complete faith and real faith, otherwise it's no faith at all, and trust in God. Don't trust in who you might call on to help you in such a battle. If these 2 kings come against you in league with one another to bring their combined armies against Jerusalem, and you think that's curtains. Ahaz was quaking and the people were all shaking, and Isaiah comes to him and says, none of that. God is the one you should trust in, and he's not going to let this happen. You're not going to fall to these combined kings. God is going to sort it out. What did Ahaz want to do? Did he want to believe what Isaiah was saying and just trust in God and wait for God to sort it out? No. He was sending his diplomats further north and further east over to Assyria. And he was hoping that if he would make an agreement with this superpower to the north and east, they could attack these 2 kings and deflect all of the problems that Ahaz was experiencing, and the battle wouldn't occur, and they would be deflected by having to go and defend themselves against Assyria instead. So he was busy trying to make league with Assyria, not listen to what Isaiah was saying about leave it to God. So part of Isaiah's message to King Ahaz was, you needn't have worried. If you'd put faith in God, he would have sorted it out. But if you put faith in the superpower, Assyria, you be aware that's going to be your undoing. Because Assyria is going to come and knock out these territories that you're concerned about at the moment. And then they'll knock out you too. All of that is world history now. You can go and look at it. You don't only need to read your Bible. You can go and look at your history books and you'll find out that's exactly what did happen. But Ahaz didn't believe it. And so Isaiah has to say to the king, look, God is going to give you a second chance to believe this. You ask God for any sign. It can be as high as the heavens. It can be low as Sheol, the underworld. You just ask for whatever you want, however miraculous you want to make it. Ask God for a sign to confirm that what I'm saying is true. That's why we read Mark chapter 16 and the last two verses, because it says that Jesus had given a message for people that were going to tell us what to believe in our day. And we might think, should we believe them or not? And it says that they went out telling the message, and what they said was confirmed by the signs that followed after them. So God allowed miraculous things to happen when those first messages were being put out to establish that they couldn't possibly be saying a lie, because God was endorsing what they said by adding miraculous signs to confirm it. And so he says to Ahaz, way back 2,000-3,000 years before, back in the days of Ahaz, and he says, Isaiah says to Ahaz, ask for a sign to confirm that this is really what God is saying, that I'm saying to you. Ahaz says, in political correctness, oh, no, we don't do things that way here. I don't ask things like that of God, because that's kind of tempting God, isn't it? Now, I think if you look at any decent commentary on this part of the Bible, it'll very quickly say, you've just got to look beneath the surface and you'll see this man didn't even believe in God properly. He wasn't obeying God. He was substituting idols for God. His concern wasn't to offend God. His concern was to get Isaiah out of the room so he could get on with his scheming and his planning to link up with Assyria against these two kings that were coming against him. But Isaiah says, well, you're going to get the sign anyway. And then we get to our Christmas verse. The virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and you'll call his name Emmanuel. And if you look in the margin of your Bible, it'll translate Emmanuel, the Hebrew, for you, and it'll say, God is with us. God with us. The baby that was to be born of a virgin was to be God with us. Some people say it could never happen. A virgin can't give birth to a baby. She needs to be married to a man. And between them, the man and the woman can make a baby, but a woman can't make the baby on her own. So the virgin can't. It must just mean a young woman was going to have a baby. Well, you tell me, how many young women do you think were having babies in the time of Ahaz, in the country that he ruled? I would say thousands. Certainly many, many hundreds. On any particular day, scores. So young women having babies is not a miraculous sign. So when Isaiah says, God is saying, ask of me a sign, and this is going to be the sign, a virgin's going to have a baby, then it was going to be that miracle. What could not happen naturally was going to happen. Did Ahaz believe it? Not a bit. Was it fulfilled in the days of Isaiah? Well, maybe it was deferred, because we know that it was fulfilled when Jesus came, God with us. When he was born of the Virgin Mary, not just the young woman Mary, but a woman who, though she was betrothed to be married, had not yet come near the man who was to be her husband, and yet she was found to be pregnant, and she was going to have a little baby, and it was going to be a sign from God that he was about to work out salvation. Ahaz was concerned about an enemy on earth. He was concerned about kings who seemed to be stronger than him. And God was saying, don't put your faith in a superpower nation. Put your faith in the supreme being, God. And when Jesus is born in Bethlehem, he's saying to the people, don't worry about the traffic and things that are going on earth. bad though they are. You won't be able to sort out these problems by yourself. I'm sending you my Son, God with us. And if we weren't sure about it from that passage in Isaiah chapter 7, all we have to do is carry on reading. And you get to Isaiah, what we call chapter 9. And the passages concerning the prophecies of Isaiah. And what does it say there? Unto you a child is born. Unto you a son is given. It's absolutely amazing the things that are said about that one who is to be a baby born on this earth. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, or Father of Eternity, Prince of Peace. And the government's going to be put upon his shoulders. And we're still waiting to see all of this fulfilled. But it will be, because God has said it. And when God speaks, he doesn't speak politically correct. He speaks the fact and the truth. He gets to his point and he makes it. People didn't believe in Ahaz's day the words of Isaiah. When Jesus was born, people didn't believe what really was happening. And you'll bump into people, perhaps even today, that have no belief in these things at all. And they might speak to you in politically correct words and they might say something to you like, well, you can believe that if you like, but of course, I don't have to believe that. And they're putting themselves into the shoes of Ahaz because they're saying that they've got a better solution to the problems that every person living in this world has than the solution that God is telling them to apply. And his solution is all wrapped up in the little baby born in Bethlehem, who grew into the man, Jesus Christ, who went to the cross, having been judged to be guilty of blasphemy when he said that he was the Son of God. So by telling the truth, it ended in him being condemned to death. But while people thought that they were going to get rid of their problem when they got rid of Jesus Christ by killing him, instead God turned the whole thing, turned the tables and turned it all upside down. And through his death, he is able to punish Jesus instead of me, instead of you, and grant us life and peace with God because he's dealt with our problem, a problem that was far too big for us to satisfy. You could say to people in Ukraine, why don't you make peace with Russia? You say, why don't you have some good diplomacy go on and have a peace agreement and just give up part of your territory? And you'll get some political answers to that question. But everybody in Ukraine is just the same as everybody in this room this morning and those who will watch this TV broadcast in due course. We're all standing in need of getting a reconciliation, not with a nation on earth, but with the supreme being who brought this world into being and gave us our life and our breath and all things. So 2 lessons to draw from this today. James says, be careful what you say. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. I want to suggest to you that that's very, very meaningful for us today, because we might fall into the trap of adding to our yes and our no words that are to no profit and that just in actual fact compromise the statement we've just made. Don't do it. Be careful even in what you say. You'll hear people say things like, oh my God, or if you're texting, OMG, you'll get texts that say OMG. What does it stand for? Oh my God. Why do people say that? Who is their God? I used to watch on television sometimes a program that showed house renovations. And when the house renovation had been all done and completed, they would bring the owner of the property back in to see the results. A big surprise as they unveiled the results of the renovation. And nearly always, it's often actually the lady that would say it, of a couple that owned the house or whatever it was that was being improved. Their jaw drops and they say, oh my God. And every time I would think to myself, well, now I know who their God is. It's their house. Because they've just described their house as their God. Oh my God, I've just seen my house renovated. Oh my God. And when you get your text message, OMG, people are trying to compromise on the truth of the reality of God, even in text messages, by using language like that, as if it was meaningless. And God in heaven doesn't ignore it. He says he's going to keep us to account for every word that we use, that we utter, or maybe even that we text. So be careful. careful in these expressions. They're called minced oaths. If you look into it, you'll find there's a whole lot of words that people use. We say good heavens, but what we're really doing is taking an oath saying, may God do so to me. We're expressing it in different words, politically correct words. Don't mess up in your language. Think about what you say. Be careful about the expressions you use. Do a bit of research and find out why these expletives are used and how they're often minced oaths. That's to say, they're puns on words that are really true, and they make them compromised into something meaningless. So that's one lesson we should be rather careful about. The other one was from this word to Isaiah that Isaiah said in his in talking to Ahaz, and he says, "Be firm in faith, or you won't be firm at all." So in contrast to this sort of avoidance of compromise and avoidance of adding to the truth in a way that turns the truth into a lie, rule number one, lesson number one, also remember that Ahaz was told in connection with this Christmas story event, be firm in your faith or you won't be firm at all. If you found your life is on a bit of a slippery slope, if it's not going the way that you expected, one of the reasons might be a lack of faith that's evidencing itself in things that are going wrong. And God is repeatedly giving you a few knocks and a few pushes and a few prods to say, do you really trust in me, or are you still going to try and do it on your own? So when these things come our way, which they will, then we can turn to God in faith and say, look, I'm quite prepared to put up with this as long as you make me put up with it. But I don't want you to think I don't believe in you. I've got my absolute confidence in you. Live or die, I am yours. So when things go wrong in our lives, and it may be something minor, it may be something major, let us not allow our faith to be anything but firm. Because if we're not firm in our faith, then we'll not be firm at all. So 2 lessons, drawn, if you like, from the Christmas story. And let's not forget that account, at this time of the year especially, that God is not mincing his words. He's telling us the truth when he says that Jesus Christ came to save us. Shall we just pray together?